Well, if you have your scriptures with you, maybe you could turn to Paul's letter to the church in Corinth. And I'll read it, just a couple of verses from chapter, let me see, probably chapter 1 or 2. Okay, chapter 2. Well, let's read from verse 1. When I came to you, brothers, I did not come with eloquence or superior wisdom, as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and much trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on man's wisdom, but on God's power. We do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age, or the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. But we speak of God's secret wisdom, the wisdom that's been hidden, and that God is destined for our glory before time began. So when you read that passage, Paul is saying that there is wisdom that man has, and man's been able to develop, maybe in his searching for theological understanding, to make things fit. And yet God wanted to give a wisdom and an insight that transcended what we could ever work out, figure out. And like we read last week, this trust we have in Him was with our whole heart. And we read back in chapter 1 of this particular book, in verse 18, he says this, the message of the cross. Okay, well, let me read verse 17. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with words of human wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. So Paul's clearly implying that the message can lose its power if we lean on human wisdom and not on the wisdom of God. He says then, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but those who are being saved, it is the power of God. And so it seems that there's an entrustment to us of the message of the cross. And God says, when you preach the message of the cross, and not just entertain the crowds with your humor, wisdom, self-depreciating humor, whatever, He says, if you preach the message of the cross, the power of God will attend it. Do you get the connection? I mean, the message of the cross is power to us. And as we said the other day, God is not a God that we trust merely because of His character and His awesome nature, His beauty, His wonder. But we're also trusting a God who's incredibly competent to do what He promised. And for that to happen, we need to access the power of God, His ability to get it done. Or else we move in more and more shallow understanding of the power of the cross. And man move further and further away from God's intention and purpose. So I wanted today to look very much at the cross. So appreciated the drama that the guys did. They didn't know what I was going to talk about, or I didn't know what they were going to do. But clearly, to end up that drama with saying to Christ, stay on the cross, I want to let you know there's something beyond the cross. Amen? But the cross was the central, pivotal point of the history of humankind. Everything in this Old Covenant Testament looked forward and predicted the cross of Jesus. And I tell you, ever since, we have been pointing back and saying, there's the source of our power. There's our reconciliation with God when Jesus died on the cross. Amen? In fact, Jesus Himself said, as often as you meet, and when you break bread and drink of wine, He said, remember me. Remember what I did. Don't forget it. Why would He say that? Why would He ask us to do it often? Because our tendency as humankind is to substitute human wisdom for the wisdom of God. If you read further down that passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, you'll find out that God's apparent foolishness is much, much greater than the wisdom of man. I will watch how easily we become disturbed, upset by the chaos that goes on in the world around us. And yet, Revelation tells us before the throne of God, there's a lake, and it's like a sea of glass. Totally undisturbed. Perfect peace. Because God is sovereign. And He's a powerful God. Amen? And He keeps His word. And He's competent to do it. Amen? And so, it's amazing when you are able to access the wisdom of God. Chaos does not upset you, or panic you, or make you anxious. Because you know that God out of chaos created a cosmos of such incredible order. It baffles the minds of the best scientists we have. Can you say amen? That just means I agree. Alright? My kids used to love to say after dinner, they never said amen, you know. They would say, I agree. Once you explained it to them. But I've got a little granddaughter, mind you, who probably watched Dora too much. At the end of all her, thank you for the food, Lord, she'd say, oh man. Maybe that's a good way to get it, oh man. But, never mind. Do not do with my sermon. Through what Jesus Christ accomplished on the cross, every provision of God, spiritual, physical, and material, for time and eternity, has been made available to you. There's no other basis other than the cross for the provisions of God. In Isaiah 53 and verse 6, it says, all we like sheep have gone astray, and turned each one to his own way, the wisdom of man. But God has led in him the iniquity of us all. In Hebrew, that word iniquity means and represents rebellion. Never think of ourselves as being rebels, do we? But I tell you, when Jesus died on the cross, it wasn't the cross that was made for Jesus of Nazareth. Who was it made for? Barabbas. Do you remember? What was Barabbas? A rebel, a murderer, a man of incredible iniquity, a rebellion, a rebel. So when Jesus Christ died on the cross, I've got to conclude He died for my iniquity, for the rebel in me. What good news that is. Amen. He died for the Barabbas in us. That gives hope to a lot of people. It's not just the good people get in. In fact, sometimes it's harder for them. The people that recognize their desperate need have a desperate need for a way to God. And I think this wisdom of God is what we want to contemplate and look at today. You see, when I think of the cross of Jesus, I would say I can think of a negative side of the cross, and I can think of some positive sides of the cross. Two arms, right? And I was thinking through this today and early this morning, and thinking to myself that when Jesus died on the cross, He made it possible for us to exchange, for us to inherit the positive side, all the good that was due to the sinless obedience of Jesus was made available to us. And on the negative side, He bore all the evil that was due us in order to make available to us all the good that was due to Jesus. Isn't that a wonderful exchange? And so when I begin to look at the cross of